It was a bright Monday morning in a small suburban town called Oak Ridge. The sun shone through the leafy trees, casting dappled shadows on the concrete sidewalks as the students of Oak Ridge High began to file off the school buses. Among them was a quiet new girl, Kendra Mitchell, with a determined but unreadable expression as she stepped off the bus. Her backpack hung over one shoulder, and her sneakers hit the pavement with a steady rhythm. Each step a reminder of the challenge ahead. Kendra had just moved to Oak Ridge from a school in Chicago, where she had spent most of her life trying to stay under the radar. Now, she was here to finish her senior year, get her diploma, and move on with her life. She wasn't looking for friends, and she certainly wasn't looking for attention, but life had a way of throwing curveballs, and as Kendra approached the large brick school building, she couldn't shake the feeling that this year was going to be different. The hallways were noisy, filled with students catching up with friends and scrambling to their classes. Kendra moved through the crowd, keeping her head down and her eyes focused straight ahead. She was used to this, being the new girl, feeling the stares of curiosity and the quiet whispers behind her back. But this time, there was something different. She wasn't just the new girl. She was a black girl in a predominantly white school, and she could feel the scrutiny from the moment she stepped inside. It was always the same. People looked at her with a mix of curiosity and judgment, wondering if she was going to be loud or aggressive, or one of those types of girls. But Kendra had learned long ago not to let their assumptions get to her. She had been through this before, in other schools, other towns, and this was no different. Her goal was simple: keep a low profile, get through her classes, and graduate. As she made her way to her locker, Kendra noticed a group of students nearby. At the center of the group was Madison Hayes, a tall blonde girl who seemed to carry an aura of authority that made others gravitate toward her. Madison was the type of girl who made the rules, who dictated who was popular and who wasn't. She was the queen bee, and the school seemed to revolve around her. Flanking Madison were two girls, Alexis and Sarah, who followed her like loyal shadows. But it wasn't just the girls who had Kendra's attention. Standing with them were two boys: Ethan Hayes, Madison's older brother, a senior and star quarterback, and Jake Ramirez, a sharp-eyed, cocky guy with a grin that suggested he thought the world revolved around him. Kendra had no intention of getting involved with them. She wasn't here for drama, so she focused on opening her locker, blocking out the whispers and stares that followed her. But there was something about Madison that Kendra couldn't ignore. Madison's gaze lingered on her, calculating, sizing her up. Kendra felt it. She knew what was coming. It didn't take long for the first wave of teasing to begin. By lunchtime, Kendra had found an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria, hoping to eat in peace. She wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found her anyway. As she sat there, quietly eating her lunch, she heard Madison's voice ring out across the room, sharp and mocking. Well, look who it is," Madison's voice sang out. The new girl, sitting all alone. "You shy or just too good for everyone." Kendra didn't react. She simply kept eating, taking a calm sip of her drink, refusing to let the bait hook her. But Madison wasn't done. "I think she's just stuck up," Alexis chimed in with a grin, while Sarah added, "Maybe she's too busy looking at herself in the mirror to talk to anyone." The cafeteria had gone quiet now. All eyes on Kendra, waiting for a reaction. Kendra didn't give them one. She didn't even look up. Then, the mocking turned to outright ridicule. "Maybe she doesn't speak English," Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe she's just slow," Ethan added with a cocky smirk. Kendra felt the heat of their words, but she didn't flinch. She set her fork down, calmly wiped her hands with a napkin, and stood up without a word. She picked up her tray and walked to the trash can, dropping it without a single glance at Madison or her group. When she turned to leave, there was something in her eyes. Something cool, controlled, and unbothered. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even resentment. It was patience. And in that moment, Madison felt something shift, something unfamiliar, uncertainty. The rest of the day passed with whispers trailing behind Kendra wherever she went. By the time the final bell rang, people were already talking about the scene in the cafeteria. The new girl hadn't reacted the way they expected. She hadn't been humiliated. She hadn't even shown the slightest sign of being upset. She just walked away. And Madison, who had been used to everyone around her shrinking under her gaze, felt the first stirrings of doubt. The next day at Oak Ridge High, the atmosphere was different. Kendra could feel it as soon as she stepped off the bus. students were looking at her, not with the usual curiosity, but with something more intense. Whispers followed her through the hallways, and even the occasional side glance from Madison's crew sent a ripple of unease through her. But Kendra remained calm. She had faced far worse before. This was just another day, another challenge. However, the shift in the air wasn't lost on Madison and her friends. The previous day, their little game had failed. They had expected Kendra to react, to show weakness, but instead, she had walked away untouched. And that was a problem. In the cafeteria the following day, Madison and her group began their plan to test Kendra. They started small, pushing her buttons just to see how far they could go without her reacting. During gym class, Alexis and Sarah bumped into Kendra as they walked by, their elbows knocking into her intentionally. Every time it happened, Kendra didn't flinch. She didn't even acknowledge it. They pushed harder, trying to provoke a response. But Kendra remained a stone wall, unaffected by their childish antics. Then, during basketball practice later that day, Ethan decided to join in. Kendra had the ball, dribbling carefully, when he approached from behind and shoved her hard, causing her to stumble slightly. The gym went silent for a moment, but Kendra simply recovered her balance, her gaze unwavering. Ethan smirked, thinking he had broken her. But Kendra didn't even look at him. She just kept playing, moving with a grace and calmness that unsettled him. It wasn't submission. It wasn't defeat. It was control. The control to not let people like Madison's group rattle her. Madison watched this from the sidelines. Her arms crossed over her chest. Her eyes narrowed. She had thought Kendra was just a shy new girl trying to play tough. But as the day went on, and the teasing became more obvious, something inside Madison started to shift. This wasn't going as planned. Why wasn't Kendra reacting? Why wasn't she scared? Or at least angry? Madison's frustration began to grow. By the time lunch came, she was ready for something more. She couldn't let Kendra's cool composure go unanswered. Not now. As Kendra walked into the cafeteria, she noticed the shift in the energy. The usual hum of conversation was still there, but there was an undercurrent to it now. The eyes on her weren't just curious. They were expectant. The whispers were louder. The tension was palpable. Kendra walked calmly to the lunch line, grabbing a tray of food, but as soon as she turned around, she felt the push. Madison had timed it perfectly. With a loud crash, Kendra's tray tipped over, spilling food all over the floor. A ripple of laughter filled the cafeteria. Kendra stood there for a moment, her face unreadable. Madison grinned, stepping forward, clearly enjoying her victory. "Oh no," Madison said, mocking concern. Did the poor little new girl drop her lunch? How sad. The laughter grew louder, but Kendra didn't flinch. She didn't even look angry. She just stood still, the eyes of the entire cafeteria on her, waiting for her to break. The school's queen bee had won, hadn't she? Kendra exhaled slowly. She set her tray down, calmly wiped her hands with a napkin. And then, without a word, she bent down and picked up her tray. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She didn't even throw an insult. She simply walked to the trash can and dumped the remains of her lunch, then turned on her heel and walked out of the cafeteria. The room was quiet for a moment. Then it erupted in laughter again. But it wasn't the same this time. The laughter was forced, unsure. Jessica's grin faltered for just a second as Kendra's calm, collected exit left everyone unsure about what to make of her. There was no humiliation. There was no apology. Kendra had walked away untouched, unaffected. And that made Madison feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Uncertainty. Kendra's walk to her next class felt like a slow march to victory. She could feel the weight of the stairs following her every step. But she didn't care. In fact, she liked the challenge. She knew the game now, and the rules had changed. Madison and her crew weren't going to stop. But Kendra wasn't here to play their games. She was here to survive. She wasn't going to be the victim. And the next time they pushed, she was ready to show them just how wrong they were to pick on her. But as Kendra entered the classroom, she felt the shift. It was subtle, but it was there. The whispers had taken a different turn. Now, people weren't talking about how weak or shy she was. They were curious. Some were impressed. Kendra had, without even trying, broken the social hierarchy that Madison had built with her carefully crafted image of power and control. Madison, for the first time, found herself on the defensive. People were talking about Kendra. They weren't laughing at her anymore. They were watching her, studying her. Jessica gritted her teeth. She couldn't lose control. Not like this. Not to someone like Kendra. The days that followed were a game of cat and mouse. Madison couldn't shake the feeling that she had underestimated Kendra. Every day, she watched from the sidelines as Kendra moved through the halls, calm and collected, never flinching under the weight of the whispers and the stares. Every encounter, every slight, was met with the same steady gaze, the same unbothered demeanor. Kendra had done something that Madison had never expected. She had taken control of the narrative, and Madison didn't know how to fight it. But Madison wasn't going to give up. She was the queen of Oak Ridge High, and she wasn't about to let some new girl, especially one who refused to be humiliated, take that away from her. So she made a plan, a bigger move, one that would force Kendra into a corner. This time, there would be no walking away. There would be no more calm smiles and quiet patience. Madison would make sure of it. It started innocently enough. The next day during gym class, Madison, Alexis, and Sarah made sure to accidentally bump into Kendra as they passed. A shove here, an elbow there, small things designed to break her composure. But Kendra didn't flinch. She didn't even look at them. She simply kept her pace. Her eyes focused on the activity ahead. This was no longer about small insults. Madison was preparing for something bigger. During basketball practice, Kendra was moving down the court when Ethan, always the cocky quarterback, intercepted the ball from her, giving it a hard shove that caused her to stumble. He grinned, clearly thinking he was in control, but Kendra didn't react. She didn't even glance his way. It was as if nothing had happened. Madison's irritation grew with every passing day. She needed Kendra to react. She needed Kendra to break. Without that, she felt like she was losing everything. So, Madison decided to escalate things further. It wasn't just about humiliating Kendra anymore. It was about proving that she could make Kendra submit, just like every other person who had ever crossed her path. By the time lunch came, Madison had already decided this would be the moment. The cafeteria was buzzing with energy as students made their way through the lunch line, sitting down with their friends. Kendra took her usual place in the back corner of the cafeteria, sitting alone, her lunch untouched as she simply looked around the room. Madison saw her opportunity. She waited for Kendra to pick up her tray, just as she had done every day. Then, with a swift motion, Madison shoved her tray off the table, spilling her food everywhere. The room went silent. "Oh no," Madison said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Did the little new girl drop her lunch? That's so sad." For the first time, Kendra paused. Her eyes shifted to Madison, and for a fleeting moment, Madison thought she had finally broken her. But Kendra didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She didn't even flinch. She simply looked at Madison, a small, calculating smile playing at the corners of her lips. Then, without a word, Kendra bent down, picked up her tray, and calmly walked to the trash can. She didn't say a thing, and she didn't give Madison the satisfaction of a fight. The silence in the cafeteria stretched for what felt like an eternity. Madison's smirk began to fade, and she realized, too late, that she had made a mistake. Kendra hadn't reacted the way she was supposed to. She hadn't given her the satisfaction of being humiliated. And worse, Kendra hadn't even looked scared. There was something far more unsettling in the quiet way she had handled the situation. Madison's chest tightened as she tried to make sense of it. Kendra had taken the power from her. She hadn't had to do anything except remain calm. But Madison wasn't done yet. Later that afternoon, word spread fast across the school. Students were buzzing, retelling the cafeteria scene. "Did you see how she didn't even flinch?" they whispered. "She just walked away." The whispers weren't about Madison anymore. They were about Kendra, and that was something Madison couldn't stand. By the time the bell rang, the tension had escalated. Madison's entire world felt as if it was crumbling. She wasn't the one in control anymore. Students who used to fear her now talked about Kendra. They were intrigued by her, and Madison hated that more than anything. That evening, Madison sat at home, staring out the window, replaying the cafeteria scene over and over in her mind. How had she gotten it so wrong? How had Kendra turned the tables on her so quickly? Madison's fingers dug into her palms, her frustration boiling over. She needed to fix this. She needed to remind everyone who was in charge. By the next morning, Madison had formulated a plan. She wasn't going to let Kendra walk away unscathed. She would make sure Kendra knew her place. It wouldn't just be a prank anymore. It would be a confrontation. She had the support of her friends. Ethan, Jake, Alexis, Sarah. They were all in, behind the gym, where no one would be able to see. They would end this. Kendra knew it was coming. She could feel it in the air, as soon as she stepped off the bus. The whispers had changed again. People weren't talking about her like they used to. Now, they were talking about how she had embarrassed Madison. And that, Kendra knew, was why Madison was coming for her. But Kendra wasn't afraid. She had already won in the ways that mattered. When the final bell rang, Kendra didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the back of the school, where Madison and her crew were already waiting. The crowd was large now. About 20 students had gathered, their phones out, ready to capture whatever would happen next. Madison crossed her arms, a smug look on her face. "So, you actually showed up," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "I thought you'd just keep running away like yesterday." Kendra didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head slightly, as though bored by the entire situation. "You think pushing me around is a fight?" Kendra asked calmly, her voice steady. Madison's smile faltered, but she didn't let it show. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "I plan to make it a real one." Kendra's expression didn't change. She stood there, calm, controlled, and entirely in command of the moment. And then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she spoke the words that sent a chill down Madison's spine. "I'm here to warn you." The crowd fell silent, and Madison, for the first time, felt the full weight of Kendra's words. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an empty boast. It was a warning, and Madison had no idea what Kendra would do next.